Dear Mr. Schneider, Deputy Director of the Swiss Federation of Small and Medium Enterprises, SGV USA, dear Mr. Sidenko, President of the Ukrainian Swiss Business Association, dear Mr. Shobian, President of the Blockchain Association of Ukraine, dear guests and dear members of the business community. It is an honor to be here with you today in the beautiful city of Lugano for the second business forum hosted by SGV, USEM, USBA, and the Blockchain Association of Ukraine. I would like to warmly thank them for this organization. I'm happy to see many representatives of both public and private sectors, industry leaders, innovators, investors, and government officials from across Europe. A significant amount of important reforms has been undertaken in the last years. For example, banking sector, we just spoke about blockchain, digitalization. A lot has been achieved. A lot remains to be done. Steadfast implementation of structural and institutional reforms is now critical to ensure that the start of the recovery unfolds into strong and sustainable growth. In the midst of crucial challenges, welcoming the Business Forum serves as another key stepping stone for the reconstruction process of Ukraine. For a better understanding, here is how my presentation will be structured. I will start with introductory comments on the various actors and coordinators within our State Secretary of Economic Affairs, as well as with the role and main task of the State Secretariat for Economic Affairs in general. Then I will give some contextual information and will state the global objectives before continuing with the presentation of possible bilateral and multilateral measures between Switzerland and Ukraine. These measures are still a work in progress and subject to decision by the Federal Council. I want to present to you what we are contemplating so far. At the end, questions and, of course, suggestions are very welcome to nourish the discussion further on. SECO's role and main task is to strengthen Switzerland's economic relation with the world and to support the Swiss economy worldwide by continuously improving the framework conditions that encourage the private sector to invest in Switzerland and around the world. In concrete terms, SECO, for example, negotiates improved market access within the framework of the WTO or concludes free trade agreements to facilitate market access. In addition, SECO represents Switzerland in multilateral economic organizations such as the EFTA, the WTO, the World Bank, or the OECD. The third pillar of SECO is the implementation of economic and trade policy measures to support developing and emerging countries. Taking this mandate seriously, the State Secretary of Economic Affairs of Switzerland has been working on economic measures to rebuild Ukraine since December last year. 3 departments are specifically participating in their elaboration: the Promotion Activities Directorate, the Economic Cooperation and Development Division, as well as the Bilateral Economic Relations Divisions. The context, the Lugano Principles. As you may remember, during the Ukraine Recovery Conference held last summer in Lugano, key principles had been established. Participants at the conference discussed reconstruction priorities and the need to coordinate support. The agenda included, in particular, discussion of reconstruction priorities, methods, and principles. Participants also examined the various facets of reconstruction in terms of infrastructure, the economy, the environment, and social affairs. At the end of the conference, Switzerland and Ukraine, with the support of international partners, presented the Lugano Declaration. This document establishes a framework that will guide Ukraine's reconstruction. It also establishes the Lugano Principles, which will serve as common benchmark for the future. As the following bilateral measures are based on this framework, I would like to briefly come back to the Lugano principles. First of all, the recovery process is led and driven by Ukraine and conducted in partnership with its international partners. Second, the recovery process is reform-focused. That means it has to contribute to accelerating, deepening, broadening, and achieving Ukraine's reform efforts and resilience. Third, it has to be transparent and accountable to the people of Ukraine. Fourth, the recovery process has to be rooted in democratic participation by the population. Fifth, it is aiming to a multi-stakeholder engagement. Sixth, it has to be inclusive and ensure gender equality and respect for human rights. Finally, the recovery process has to rebuild Ukraine in a sustainable manner. Another part of the context is not only the Lugano principles, but also you have the process with the European Union and OECD principles and standards in corporate governance. In addition to the Lugano principles and Swiss legal basis, the OECD principles and standards of corporate governance give, as an example, another framework that has to be respected as well in order to create a stable and deep-rooted reconstruction program. In a nutshell, here are for us the most relevant OECD principles. For the corporate governance framework should promote transparent and fair markets and the efficient allocation of resources. It should be consistent with the rule of law and support effective supervision and enforcement. Second, the corporate governance framework should provide sound incentives throughout the investment chain and provide for stock markets to function in a way that contributes to good governance. Third and last, the corporate governance framework should recognize the rights of stakeholders established by law or through mutual agreements and encourage active cooperation between corporation and stakeholders in creating wealth, jobs, and the sustainability of financially viable projects. So the private sector has a very strong role here to play. Turning to the objective, with these objectives in mind, as of today, the overall objective is Switzerland's effective and sustainable contribution to the reconstruction of Ukraine, oriented to the specific and concrete needs of the country. This is intended, on the one hand, to create jobs and income in Ukraine, on the other hand, to mobilize resources and expertise of the Swiss private sector and to promote their involvement in concrete projects. Since the start of the Russian aggression on Ukraine, Switzerland reacted very quickly by adapting its existing international cooperation projects to the new needs of the country and by providing humanitarian aid. As mentioned by Ambassador Bollinger, the total amount of international cooperation and humanitarian aid budget for Ukraine in 2022 raised to 270 million Swiss francs, where it is normally 25 million a year. Both these engagements will continue in 2023. However, Ukraine's reconstruction is a Herculean task that must go beyond international cooperation and involve as many actors as possible, including you, the private sector. This is a view to reach over the pre-existing cooperation and development projects. The support shall especially focus on areas in which there is an immediate need in Ukraine and where Switzerland has its strengths. For example, energy supply and energy grids, sustainability, mobility, and health. Financial assistance for urgently needed infrastructure rehabilitation represent the bulk of the proposed support. The other ideas are of a supporting or complementary nature. They include project preparation studies and various measures that help to promote and secure private and entrepreneurial activities for reconstruction. In certain cases, and if conditions are met, long-term, they can also be applied now. Overall, however, they are targeted to the medium and long-term and will come into play as soon as the general conditions improve to such an extent that bilateral business relations will pick up again on a sound basis. The Federal Council of Switzerland asked the Federal Department of Foreign Affairs and the Federal Department of Economic Affairs on April the 5th to examine how Switzerland could participate in the reconstruction of Ukraine and what the legal basis, financial implications, and modalities of support should be. SECO especially was requested to develop proposals on how framework conditions may be created in a way that the Swiss private sector can also participate in the reconstruction of Ukraine. The planned measures have only been entered into the discussion among experts with the Federal Department of Foreign Affairs. They are therefore part of a work in progress that will need to be consulted and adapted over time to reflect changing circumstances. A first important decision should be taken by the Federal Council in June this year before it goes to Parliament for approval in winter 2023. That means by the time of its implementation, around spring next year, the situation may evolve and the following measures might be adapted. Now let me turn to these possible bilateral measures between Switzerland and Ukraine. Additionally to the international cooperation measures that will be implemented for Ukraine and are already done to a certain extent, I would like to present to you in more detail each possible measure that SECO is contemplating in relation with Ukraine's reconstruction. First, financing of project preparation studies. For chosen infrastructure sectors, project preparation could be financed. This concerns, for example, master plans, feasibility studies, and environmental impact assessment. The studies are intended to provide a basis for decision-making for various bodies and to enable international cooperation and privately funded projects to be derived. Second, financial aid or project financing for the acquisition of Swiss products and services in specific sectors. Essentially, the Ukrainian state could be awarded financial aid in specific sectors under a bilateral state-to-state agreement, which it could use to purchase urgently needed Swiss products and services, including engineering services. This may include suitable products, for instance, windows, insulators for electrical substation, etc., produced locally by the subsidiaries of Swiss companies. This would be done primarily in sectors in which Swiss international cooperation is already active in Ukraine and for which a competitive offer exists in Switzerland. In the focus are the sector of energy, transport and mobility, and possibly healthcare, where Switzerland already has a reliable partner relationship through international cooperation. A successful example is the delivery of rail fastening systems for around 14 million Swiss francs, which took place within the framework of the Ukraine Winter Aid 2022 and was arranged via the so-called liaison office at SECO for large infrastructure projects. Supplies in which the Swiss private sector makes a contribution in the form of in-kind services are also conceivable. This could include, for example, high-voltage equipment or second-hand rail vehicles provided free of charge. The Swiss private sector has already applied high-voltage equipment, supplied high-voltage equipment to Ukraine, and is prepared to further provide such urgently needed equipment if a portion of the cost are shared. We are of the view that by focusing on areas in which Swiss industry has a proven strength, a cutting edge, as well as through the use of Swiss technologies and products, demonstration effects and goodwill will be created among Ukrainian partners for the other measures or for complementary economic activities of the private sector. Third, extension of the mandate to promote the participation of Swiss industry in major foreign infrastructure projects to Ukraine. The essential services that have been successfully provided within the framework of the government mandate to promote the participation of Swiss industry in large foreign infrastructure project of April 21, 2021, should now also be available to Swiss exporters for Ukraine. Exporters would thus benefit from general promotion of their products, identification for great business opportunities, including early communication of information on upcoming public tenders, etc., advice, and other measures adapted to the reconstruction context. It is a transversal measure which also includes coordination services for the realization of the so-called Team Switzerland approach, promotes the use of all planned measures, and is intended to serve as a one-stop shop for Swiss industry to participate in reconstruction measures if possible. Fourth, Economic Forum. After a successful first event in Lugano last summer, and this very present forum, follow-up events could also be considered and organized also by SECO in cooperation with the private sector, which would pursue two objectives. First, highlight the current economic and infrastructural conditions and needs in Ukraine, especially in those sectors for which Switzerland has a competitive offer and can thus add value through its know-how. Again, it is here thought that the focus should be on the sector of energy, transport, mobility, and if necessary, healthcare. Second, to facilitate or establish contacts between the key stakeholders is crucial for reconstruction. The Swiss government, Swiss companies, Ukrainian representatives of the government, the Ukrainian oblast, and the Ukrainian private sector. This may result in synergies with the two former measures. The export promotion aspects can possibly also be transferred to the export promoter, Swiss Global Enterprise, at a later stage, if necessary. Fifth, strengthening the risk capacity of the Swiss Export Risk Insurance Serve for the benefit of exporters. Due to the situation in Ukraine, the support of deliveries by the Swiss Export Risk Insurance and its European counterparts is severely limited. SERV should therefore be put in a position to better insure export transactions in the order of magnitude of, for example, maximum 5 to 10 million Swiss francs to Ukraine, especially in the medium to longer term. For this purpose, SERV should be provided with a special credit, thanks to which it can assess the risk situation of possible transactions in such a way that insurance can be taken out and any losses would be covered. This concept can be applied by SERV on an exceptional and temporary basis for export services required to maintain and repair infrastructure destroyed in war. This again supports the objective of the financial aid for the acquisition of Swiss products and services and the extension of the mandate to promote participation of the Swiss industry in major foreign infrastructure projects in Ukraine. Examples are supplies of machinery and other equipment. At the basis, there must be nevertheless a commercial export transaction or a business. The residual risk must still be borne by a bank. 6, and last but not least, de-risking of investment in Ukraine. In order for the Swiss private sector to participate in the reconstruction of Ukraine, it needs appropriate framework conditions. In addition to an ongoing reform process, there is also a need for a particular access to financing, which is very limited at the moment due to the Russian aggression in Ukraine. Under these measures, various instruments should be used to restore the framework conditions for the private sector, to the extent that investments are possible again. In the process, the high risk posed by the war situation should be mitigated at various levels. Furthermore, international measures also participate to the global de-risking regarding upcoming investment in Ukraine. To this end, the following three so-called de-risking instruments could be available either bilaterally or in association with other countries. First, investment risk insurance is needed so that direct investments, if possible by Swiss companies in Ukraine, can be insured against losses due to acts of war. For instance, destruction of production facilities. For this purpose, participation in a program of the Multilateral Investment Guarantee Agency, MIGA, is being considered. To make the coverage commercially viable for MIGA, plans could be made with other donors to provide participation with grant funds. MIGA would share up to 20% of the risks. For example, a major Swiss company is now in contact with MIGA to increase its production capacity in Ukraine in order to make the offer known and more usable for Swiss companies' promotion and consulting, via the third measure would be appropriate. Second, with blended finance. One could participate directly with equity first loss or indirectly via guarantees in financing pools that finance, for example, infrastructure, project or supply chains in Ukraine. It thus reduces the risk for private investors to mobilize them. However, the basic prerequisite for the efficiency of the mechanism remains that a certain return can be generated over time. A blended finance solution with the International Financial Corporation, IFC for farmer financing, offers Swiss suppliers interesting opportunities in this area. First, loss participation in development finance companies, such as the Swiss Investment Fund for Emerging Markets, CIFEM, in Switzerland, could encourage additional investment in Ukraine. Third, and finally, direct grants for investment projects, in the sense of matchmaking grants, for instance, per invested franc. In the case of concrete investment project by the private sector, there is a possibility that the investment will be supplemented with public funds. With increasing normalization, the state's risk participation should and will decrease, so that private profits are not subsidized. Those measures are combining elements from the Economic Development Cooperation and local promotion. They should particularly create jobs and income in Ukraine and mobilize funds and knowledge of the Swiss private sector for their inclusion in concrete projects. Again, as we are still working on them, they are not set in stone. They will be adapted and revised in the future to fully respond to the actual needs of Ukraine. Now, let me say a few words to possible multilateral measures, which are not directly the topic here in Lugano, but nevertheless, the complemented bilateral measures are supplemented by multilateral ones. In order to provide financial assistance, the Swiss government supports and financially contributes to the instrument of international organizations, such as the World Bank and the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, the EBRD. These organizations have set up funds to pool contribution to Ukraine from different countries. Multilateral measures are greatly needed, as their volumes and global structure will bring more volume and efficiency to the whole reconstruction process. Furthermore, multilateral measures are participating in the global de-risking of investments to Ukraine. The World Bank's State and Peace Building Fund is working to keep the state's finance in balance and to ensure that salaries are paid to public service staff, such as teachers and police, through the Ukraine Relief, Recovery, Reconstruction and Reform Trust Fund. Switzerland is helping with the urgent repair of destroyed energy infrastructure. Within the framework of the EBRD, Switzerland is primarily involved in supporting the private sector in Ukraine. The EBRD Small Business Impact Fund, for example, helps to improve the environment for SMEs. Activities include providing advice, strengthening supply chain, ensuring access to finance, and establishing industrial parks. Through the Swiss Investment for Fund for Emerging Markets, CFEM, Switzerland invests in the Horizon Capital Growth Fund, which support IT and export startups. Discussions are also ongoing in Strasbourg regarding the setup of a register on damages caused by the Russian military aggression against Ukraine. Such a register should be one of the main results of the Fourth Council of Europe Summit, which will be held on the 16th and 17th of May in Reykjavik. It may be possible that some states will announce anytime soon their support to such a project. Switzerland is participating to those discussions, which are in line with its commitment to Ukraine's reconstruction, as previously stated at the Ukraine Recovery Conference last year in Lugano. Let us note that Switzerland, as part of the OECD framework, is considering making a contribution up to 250,000 million Swiss francs for the Ukraine country program. However, this is still subject to approval. Before concluding, I would like to come back to a concrete example of a successful collaboration between a private initiative and our government presented to you by Ambassador Bollinger, that is the CIS Rebuild Ukraine. We can see that such a fruitful collaboration oriented to long-term and sustainable recovery is possible. This project is with and for Ukraine's reconstruction, Ukraine's people, and Ukraine's future. Please let me conclude. Through both bilateral and multilateral ways, Switzerland supports Ukraine in this difficult but crucial time. Many Swiss companies believe in Ukraine's future. They invest and will continue to invest in Ukraine. We hope that the framework and the measures we are currently working on and will probably be adapted will concretely help for the Ukraine reconstruction process. The Swiss commitment to Ukraine is deep-rooted and strong. We wish to continue our close collaboration together. Ukraine is a rich, resilient, resourceful, and dynamic country with an enormous potential to be realized. I really congratulate you on your willingness to help and your courage. Recovery is easier with friends. I'm confident that this fruitful exchange will move Ukraine forward. In closing, let me thank again USAM, USBN, the Blockchain Association of Ukraine, our organizers, as well as the city of Lugano, for bringing us together as well as the participants. Thank you very much.